we have to feed them real foods. I like to call them God foods, foods that come from God, have grown, have lived. These are always going to have more complexity and nuance than we can ever synthetically make in a lab. The fact is that ultra-processed foods are net harmful. And so it's not only that you're missing out on these complex nutrients that the body requires for optimal health, but you're providing substrates, additives, binders, stabilizers, chemicals, neurotoxins that actually cause stress to that child's body. And then the body has dysmetabolic function because it's trying to protect itself from injury from consumed additives. But Naturally Nourished Kids, I think, is really essential today because it's anti-inflammatory, low glycemic, and really sets the tone for mental and metabolic health. And at this climate and this time, we're seeing 1 in 5 kids diagnosed with a learning disorder or a mental disorder. We're seeing 20% of children on at least one pharmaceutical drug. We're seeing obesity and prediabetes just skyrocketing and fertility plummeting. So this is really a time for pivot and to get back in the kitchen. I think that in itself is a big barrier for many. But I think with what's hitting in the climate politically with banning of food dyes and the understanding of more of a national conversation on seed oils and ultra-processed foods and how we're subsidizing them and other elements in the big picture industry that are driving metabolic dysfunction, that this is really a timely solution to teach parents how to fuel with whole real foods, how to identify what is a food versus a processed product, and really how to feel confident with how to nourish our children through developmental age.
Totally agree. It seems as though, like, obviously the obesity epidemic and just the lack of health that our society is faced with these days, like that demographic has grown. But on the same token, the people interested in actually diving deeper, taking initiative over their health, like that demographic has also grown. So I think by proportion, we're still getting sicker and sicker than we've ever been. But there seems to be a growing body of people that are like actually trying to figure things out and improve themselves.
Yes, like the bell curve is getting narrower because there's more people falling into that desired health, right? Versus kind of, I think, maybe 2 decades ago, that bell curve was quite grand and disease and discrepancy of wellness. Now we're seeing a lot more dynamic for sure.
Yeah. It seems, though, it's unfortunate that a lot of people, especially like the people that I'm working with, like they're coming to me wanting to take initiative after they've already kind of given up their health. Like they're trying to make up from lost ground. And like with kids, like they're a blank canvas. Like they got so much potential, and like I don't think it's malicious. Like their parents oftentimes just don't know. They're just ignorant, and it's putting them on a very bad path early on. And plus you get the whole epigenetic phenomenon that you can throw into the conversation. That just creates a whole lot more havoc. But do you feel like the demographic of parents wanting to get started off on the right foot with their kids in adolescence is also growing at a similar rate?
Yes, and similar so in the sense that also there's more than ever disease and neurological imbalance that we've seen today, than we've seen in prior years. And so I think there's more of a need, more of a concern for prevention or maybe getting ahead of things. I think in the world of ADHD for certain, and, I'm in the natural medicine field, so people seek me for alternative solutions, but I'm seeing a lot more parents when we think in our generation, when the Ritalin and the Adderall and those stimulant drugs were really not questioned or thought through. I'm seeing a lot of parents, although maybe the school or teacher or they've tested to fall into said category and have had recommended pharmacological interventions, a lot of parents that are hesitating or pausing or wanting to seek food as medicine, supplement support, or really understand even different learning environments for their child when they're getting these diagnoses. So I think that's a positive win because we're still seeing such significant addiction and neurotransmitter imbalance from use of those medications. And this can carry into the 30s, into the 40s, et cetera, of an aging adult.
Yeah, it wakes you up to the reality that we live in when, like, now that we have kids, like we'll go to the playground and we'll just watch people and we'll judge people. We're those people. But like, when when you've got someone that's older and mature and just advanced in years and they're overweight, it's like, okay, they've done that to themselves. It's unfortunate, but that's just what they've created. Then you look at people like little kids that are 5, 6, 7 years old and they're like morbidly obese and can't even get on the play equipment because they're just so unhealthy. It's like, man, you can't blame them for it, but like that seems to be much more common than not. And there's been several kids that I've run into that are literally diabetic in single digit ages. And it's just like, how is that even happening?
Yes, we've now diagnosed type 2 diabetes as early as age 4. And it literally, within my lifespan as a certified diabetes educator, used to be called adult onset diabetes. Like it literally wasn't called type 2, it was called adult onset, which deemed it a lifestyle disorder. And then that, over the last 15 years, had to be rebranded to type 2 diabetes. And now, it's very far from adult. We're in that extended toddler stage that we're starting to see it because of the amounts of refined sugar and high fructose corn syrup and just the metabolic syndrome that we're seeing in the stress to the liver.
And I would assume like if a kid has, like if they were, as the mother was pregnant, if she had gestational diabetes, the likelihood that that child is going to have type 2 diabetes at an early age is
significantly.
I don't know what the data is from a statistic standpoint, but I would assume exponentially higher.
No doubt. Yes, because you're giving baby higher levels of insulin right away, so you're priming them for that hyperinsulinemia and then earlier onset of insulin resistance over time.
So if you're looking, I mean, your book dives into this, but when parents listen to this are just wanting to like, okay, what's the low hanging fruit that I can put into action like today? What would be like the biggest pitfalls that people are making, and what's an easy swamp or alternative that they can just do in their home to make a meaningful change?
Yes. So as far as like foundations, I'm not sure, these are the things that are necessary to eat naturally nourished or to support a naturally nourished child. First and foremost, the guideline is we have to feed them real foods. I like to call them God foods, foods that come from God, have grown, have lived. If a protein source has had a parent, was birthed by a mother, because unfortunately we're already seeing lab grown petri dish meat out there. So that matters to define what is God food versus what is a chemical experiment. So these preliminary elements of something that was alive, something that can decay or mold or wilt, these are always going to have more complexity and nuance than we can ever synthetically make in a lab. And that is because we are not as divinely intuitive and creative. Anytime we try to mess with something in its perfect natural form, let's compare breast milk to formula. We're every 5 years trying to catch up to find a new thing. Like, there is human milk oligosaccharides in breast milk, and you can't lab manufacture or synthesize human milk oligosaccharides. They can put oligosaccharides, they can put another, fermentable carbohydrate, but that does not prime the microbiome the same as mother's milk. We can add colostrum from cow now into formula, but it's not the same as mama's colostrum that grew the baby. We're not adding CBD to formula yet, but I think we will, because we know that there's even cannabidiol in mama's breast milk, and that likely plays a role with baby's regulation of appetite and inflammation and sleep. So I think soon we'll see trying to add that as a synthetic. And so there's always 5, 6, 7 steps ahead that nature provides. And we can look at that in, the complexity of the phytocompounds and nutrients in an apple versus, of course, the far down the line of what some individuals would say all foods fit an apple gummy, right? Has the same carbs, has the same macros, has the same vitamin C, but does it have quercetin? Does it have unique flavonoids? Does it have unique antioxidants? So we always want to first start preliminary with, is this God food? Is this whole real food? Is this composed of single ingredients, or is it a product with multiple ingredients? So that's kind of like the first tier to start. And absolutely, there are some packaged foods that fit the bill. But then we go further to say, can you identify and understand the ingredients listed, right? Are these foods or are these chemical additives? And the important element of that is that we hear often in the messaging that those are just empty calories, or, ultra processed foods. Oh yeah, they could be high calorie, but we never hear, they kind of try to neutralize, like it's a net zero effect and it might just be giving you too many calories. And that's not the fact. The fact is that ultra processed foods are net harmful. They're not net neutral. And so it's not only that you're missing out on these complex nutrients that the body requires for optimal health, but you're providing substrates, additives, binders, stabilizers, agricultural elements that were sprayed on after harvest, chemicals, neurotoxins that actually cause stress to that child's body, to the mitochondria or energy factories in their body. And then the body has dysmetabolic function because it's trying to protect itself from injury from consumed additives. So I think that's kind of like the preliminary is we have to get comfortable with first in the household identifying what is a whole real food. Where are there some processed products that we need to make swap outs in our household? So maybe it's that first after school snack. And, maybe we're looking at moving away from a packaged chip or some form of, processed sold gummy or other product that are sold to children. And we're changing that to fruit with nut butter, or we're changing that to a smoothie with single ingredients and a scoop of grass-fed whey in there. And so these little swap outs of, deconstructing patterns into new routines that come from whole real foods. And the breakfast, getting the eggs back on the table so we get choline for neurotransmitter and cognitive focus. We have so many recipes of egg cups, green eggs and ham, fun ways to get choline and brain supporting nutrients in those eggs for children. Even doing nut flour muffins and incorporating eggs far superior to a refined processed breakfast cereal. And that kind of takes me to the second point. So whole real foods versus processed products, and identify where the processed products are most poignant and how you can swap those out. And then the second is glycemic index and keeping carbs in check and having enough protein. And so that's the next level that we see and could be equally, especially on like a short-term observation with behavior, attention, focus, metabolism, blood sugar roller coaster, getting kids off of those spikes and crashes can be, as we've seen with adults, really within 24 hours, noticeable, appreciable change, whereas the toxicity element really kind of lingers and can build up over time. Correcting blood sugar in children, I think, would substantially lower disease rate, would substantially lower neurological issues, would substantially address, of course, obesity and dysmetabolic syndrome. And the first part of that for parents is understanding what a carb is.
Yeah.
And knowing that carbs are always going to find our children. So, we actually identify, of course, keto-friendly recipes in this book, and we identify children where we feel ketosis is a strong recommendation. For me currently, because I feel that kids are very metabolically active and they have good metabolic flexibility if we're priming them appropriately and giving them low glycemic diet. Many of them will make light amounts of ketones, and they're doing so from utero through exclusive breastfeeding, and we can keep them in that state with ease with whole real foods. When they're eating salmon and avocado and smashed blueberry, they're still making light nutritional ketones. And so fruits and starchy vegetables can be very appropriate, but for some kids, if they're on the level of consideration of a weight loss drug or a neurological medication, either as an antipsychotic or mood stabilizer or stimulant, at that level, I really suggest bringing carbs tighter and getting them into a more therapeutic ketone state so that they can reduce that oxidative stress in the brain. They can really reset that broken insulin response, and we can really get them more adaptable to experience that food freedom once we correct that handicap, if that makes sense.
100%.
So, low glycemic is the way to go for sure. But for some kids, I think that keto is absolutely a strong recommendation, especially, again, if we're dealing with a condition that needs attention.